In this video, I'm going to show you how to create this variance column chart effect inside a pivot table with all the flexibility of slicers and drill down attached. So let's go. In a previous video, I showed you how you could turn data structured a bit like this into an amazing looking flexible pivot report with all these data variance bars. But what if your data is displayed horizontally with months of the year, say, for example? How are you going to get vertical data bars rather than horizontal ones when the built-in ones do not have that feature? Well, this video is all about how you go about doing that and creating reports that look like this with these vertical data bars. So you can pinpoint exactly where the problem months are and see if there's patterns across whatever criteria you want. So the first thing, I'll just give you a quick recap of the data model. Now you can always go to the previous video and look at that, and you can download this spreadsheet. It's completely free. Just click the link in the description and you'll get all the setup already there. But essentially the data structure was one where you had bare minimum a year and month for these slicers, a couple of categories and subcategories for drill down, and then actual and budget sales, or any two comparison numbers essentially. I loaded that into the Excel data model, and then I created a couple of basic measures, one for the total actual sales, one for the total budget, and one for the variance. You'll get the gist of how to create those basic measures as we go through this video anyway, so you don't need to stop that and run back unless you get stuck. I've got those measures set up, so I'm going to insert a pivot table using that data model. So insert pivot table from the data model, and I'm going to put it there. And my data model is in this button thing here, TBL all. The rest of these are just tables that exist in this spreadsheet. You might not have them. What I was going to do is put the actuals, budget and variance into this pivot table, the product category and the product subcategory as rows. And then I'm going to move the values to rows as well and remove the product subcategory for now, actually, to simplify things. And then I'm going to put the month of the year as a column. So you can see what we've got now. The months of the year, the actual budget and variance shown. That is not very nice to read and spot sort of key trends or anything like that. So we really need to do something about that. For a start, we need to add the year as a slicer because at the moment, all the years are combined. Here we go. That's our kind of very basic setup, if you like. So I'm going to go for this grey one here, and I'm going to go with the years being in 3 columns there. And then for the pivot table, on the design of the pivot table, a matching kind of style is this one, which I like to use. If you hold down Alt, you can drag it to the grid, round about like that. Now, a couple of other things to tidy up while we're here. These columns, because the values differ, they might, move around and stuff like that. So I'm going to go to the size and properties of the slicer. In properties here, you see you can have various different moving and sizing with cells. I'm going to say don't move or size with cells, which essentially means it's going to float over the top of this. So no matter what's happening to the pivot table, the slicer will stay the same size. And then on the pivot table analyze menu, which I always think is a strange place to do it because it's definitely a design feature, we remove the field headers, which we don't need because we've got this sort of structure going on here. I'm actually going to remove the grand totals for the moment as well, just to simplify matters. So we're going to say that we only want the grand totals for the rows. And one more thing is that we've got just too many digits going on, I feel, with the setup here. So I'm going to change this into display everything in thousands, and then I'm going to kind of fix the column widths as well so that things are fairly sort of steady and not jumping around. So fixing the column widths, let's do that. It's a pivot table option, and it's this untick this auto fit columns on update, which we're going to do. To change things into thousands, you can actually just highlight all of that. Control 1 or just go to the format cells. We're going to create a custom format. Now we're going to make it quite a straightforward one. So we'll pick an existing one like this, which is roughly where we want it to be. We're just going to put a comma at the end of each number, and that's going to essentially give us, treats it as thousands. It says we want nothing after the 1,000 separator. And then I'm going to put 1 decimal place on this as well, so that we get a bit of extra information. So now we're going to go on to create actual measures for the positive and negative variances and the data bars and stuff. So if you didn't work out how to get the other measures set up in the data model, then this is where you're going to find it. So essentially what you would do with your data is you'd go to the Power Pivot menu and click Add to the Data Model. Now I've already done that, so I'm going to hit Manage the Data Model, and you can see now what my measures are. We've got a total actuals, and here's the formula up here. It's simply the sum of the actual column. Total budget, sum of the budget column, and then variance, we actually use those two measures minus each other. We're not going to use the variance percentage in this case here anyway. I'm going to add some measures for the positive variance and the negative variance, and I could write them in here, but I'm going to use the add measure box on the Power Pivot model. So Power Pivot model, measures, new measure, and that way then we'll just get it in its own window, which is just going to be easier to see what's going on. Now the table I'm going to put it in is the only table available. I called it TBL all. Measure name, I'm going to call this the positive variance and just put var, right. Now we're going to need to use an if formula here, a function, sorry. We're going to say if our variance, our original variance there, is greater than 0, so otherwise it's positive, right? We're going to pick up the variance. Yeah, so I'm using arrow keys and tabs to pick up these things as I start typing, which is a much faster way of doing things. If we don't get a result, I want it to actually be blank. Now, you might want it to be something like 0, I don't know, but I just don't want extra numbers cluttering up my pivot table at the moment. So what this is effectively going to do is say, positive variance will only give me the value if there's a positive variance. I'm going to format that as a decimal number, actually with no decimal places, and use the thousand separator. I could do one of two things here really. I could divide the variance by 1,000 and then I wouldn't need to format it in thousands, or I could just format it inside the pivot table as thousands. So I want to keep all my measures and formats consistent. So I want to do one or the other through the pivot table. So I'm just going to leave it like that, and then I'm going to format it in thousands later. So that's my positive variance created, all right? So let's go back here. If, for example, now I look at my field list, I have my positive variance, and if I was to just tick that and drop it into the pivot table, you can see what it's done. It's picked up in single digits what that variance is and only shown it where it's positive. So you can see it's kind of working, right? Now, rather than go through that for the negative variance, what we can do is you can shortcut that on the Power Pivot model ribbon. We can hit manage, and it's created it over here. You can see this formula here. So I'm just going to cut that using Control X. I'm going to put it over here, positive variance, and then I'm going to make a copy of it and paste it underneath, and it's called it copy of positive variance. Doesn't matter. I'm going to go up here, name it negative variance, and this time change that to less than 0. And I want all the numbers to show as positive, so I'm just going to put a minus sign in front of the variance. So it's a negative variance, and then a double minus is going to make it a positive number. Hit enter, and you can see it's currently blank because the total of everything is blank, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to close that. And again, if I now drop that into this pivot table here, you'll see that we now have the positive and negative variances showing. So it would be nice if we could just add instant data bars to this. So like pick this one, apply it to all of these categories. So we have something that looks like that. Wouldn't it be good if we could just say, right, let's make that text vertical like that. But what you'll see happen is the text goes vertical, but not the data bar. So that is what we're trying to solve and get something that looks more like this, sort of dynamically changes as well. What I want to show you is a hack as to how you can create a data bar that you can make vertical if you need be. The basic technique around this was something that Jordan Goldmeyer always teaches, which is to use the repeat command to repeat like a piece of text. In this case, it is like a vertical line, which is normally next to the Z key on a keyboard, and repeat that by, like, say, a number. Let's say 12 for the sake of argument, and you get something like that. And then if you change that to the playbill font, you'll get something that's more like a data bar. And of course, if you put it, can make that longer or shorter depending on the number that goes in there. So that's the key technique. But the great thing about this is that you can, because it's text, rotate it vertically. I replicate that one like that. You'll get different height data bars depending on what number you pick up. And if you just align it to the top of a cell rather than the bottom, you can get it looking like it's sort of hanging down from the top. So in a nutshell, right, that is what is happening here. But how on earth do you get that inside a pivot table? Which is what I'm going to show you how to do now. So the first thing I need to do is to create a bit of a helper table, because one of the things about this data bar is that if we just link that to the variance, we could end up with a variance that's in the thousands or in the tens. And if this number drops into the thousands, for example, we're going to have something which is just ridiculous, way too unwieldy to fit on a report. So we need a way of scaling it all. So I've set up a little table here, just type this in and then turned it into an Excel table. The max height of a data bar. Now, I think 40, that's what I've been using. What I'm going to say is where will this top out? We might want it to go to 40, not at the very maximum figure. So for example, if we look at these variances here, right, a lot are in the 2000s, 1000, but there's nothing really above 3000. So actually, so that we can see quite small variances as well, why don't we make it sort of top out at about 3000? If it hits the number 3000, it just shows the maximum height data bar that it can, right? We need to turn that into some kind of scale divisor. So if we divide that by that, so we're saying for every 75 points of a variance, I want you to show one element of the data bar, so that when you get to 3000, you're showing a 40-point high data bar. In order for me to be able to use this in a pivot table, it needs to be in the data model. Provided I've made that into an Excel table, and I have, and if you don't know how to do that, you literally just highlight that data and hit Control-T. On the Power Pivot menu, we're going to add it to the data model, and it's just going to shove it in as if it were like some kind of multi-column table. We still can't use that actually. It would be nice if we could just refer to these columns as if they were, single values, because they've only got one row. The data model doesn't know it's only got one row. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a formula at the bottom of this which sums it up. Now we can use the sum. Technically you probably want to use something like a min, but because there's only one row, I'm just going to hit the auto sum button, which will sum it up. So let's just call it scale max, and then we'll just create sums on all of them, and we'll just give them sort of sensible names. So this one, we'll call it scale divisor. Now, I don't think you're allowed to do that, so we'll call it scale div. And this one, we'll call it scale top. And these are literally just the sum of those columns, but because there's only one value, like I said, it doesn't really matter that it's a sum. So why have we done that? Well, we've simply done it so that we now have measures that we can refer to inside other formulas to create our data bar inside the pivot table. Right, are you with me so far? We're on kind of step 7, if you like, here. We've got all our measures really created, and now we just need to create the actual data bar so we can drop it into the pivot table. And then what we're going to do is create a new measure in the data model. So Power Pivot, new measure. Let's call it plus counter. It's actually a piece of text, this measure, and it's essentially almost exactly the same as the Excel formula. So we're going to repeat. What text are we going to repeat? That vertical line there. So how many times do we want to repeat this by? Well, it's the positive counter, so surely the positive variance, right? But as we said before, that's going to give us a massive number in some cases. So that's why we worked out this scale divisor. So I'm just going to divide that by the scale divisor. Now that would normally be fine, but what we've previously said is that we want this scale to top out at 3000. So if we see variances above 3000 with a positive or negative, we want to show a height of 40. So what we're going to just do is embed that part of the formula inside a min function, and we're going to say it's the minimum of whatever we previously said was our scale max and the calculation we've just done. Right, we'll double close those brackets. We're going to repeat that either the minimum of 40 times or the actual value it finds, and that's our plus counter. So there's no point in formatting it because it's a piece of text, so we'll just leave it like that. And then let's just check that before we carry on any further. So if we go to the field list and we'll drop that one in, so this plus counter, and you can see that we're getting something like we might expect to get, basically a ton of repeating stuff. So next what we want to do is just create the negative version of that. As with previous measures, it's easier to just come in here, go to this table. You can see we've got this plus counter here. I'm going to cut that and paste it over here, and then I'm going to copy it, paste it again, and this time I'm just going to adapt that formula slightly to be the negative. Same formula, but instead of the positive variance, it's going to be the negative variance. And bear in mind the negative variance, we'd already changed it into a positive number. Let's again put it in to the field list. So we'll add it in. I'm just going to move it, the negative counter, to there. So you can see that this is also coming in a crazy looking format, but we're getting there. So all that remains now is to like format this so it actually looks good. Right, so one of the key things we need to be able to do is change this font into Playbill. When you click on the pivot table, if you get this little arrow showing at the side and then highlight it, as long as you click it once, you can see that it highlights everything in the pivot table that relates to that field. So that's ideal, because then we can just go to home, change that to Playbill, and we'll do exactly the same on there, which we can push F4. So now we've got our data bars showing, looking a bit more like data bars. We can highlight that. Now this time we want to change the direction of text. If we click on this, normally you want to pick one of these, yeah? Rotate text up, but it's not showing, but it doesn't really matter because you just go in here and do that, and there we go, right? A couple of changes we need to make. This one is correct because it's coming from the bottom, but this one we want it to hang from the top. So like I said before, on the home menu there, push this so that it comes down from the top there. So one of the things that we did earlier, or didn't do earlier I should say, is change our numbers on the positive and negative variance measures into thousands. So let's just do that. So we go to number format here, change it to our custom number format we picked earlier, which will be right at the bottom incidentally always. And then we'll do the same with the negative variance. Note, I'm just picking the very first occurrence of the negative variance. It doesn't matter as long as you're on it. It's all right. Doesn't matter if the cell's blank. I mean, we can now get rid of the original variance number because we don't need it. Show the field list and remove our normal variance for the moment, like that. So let's get some color onto it now. So I'm just going to make the positive green. Let's change that font color to green. Change that one to green, change this one to red, and that one to red. Instead of having this showing like this with, sort of some kind of unreadable font or anything, is put like an arrow or a symbol on there. The way I do this is if I go to Insert menu, there's a Insert Symbol box here. And as we scroll up and down here, you'll see that we can get to arrows, or should do. If only it was in alphabetical order. See, arrows, right. We want to insert an arrow up and an arrow down. Now, it doesn't really matter where we insert that because it's sort of live in the whatever cell we're in at the moment. So actually what we're going to do is just cut those for the moment. Right, so I'll cut them. So I've got them in on the clipboard, if you like. And what we're actually going to do is rename that field. Now you can type directly in there, or if you want to be a bit more certain about it, you can say, go to the value field settings, and you see it's got a custom name here. So that's the plus one. So if we make that a plus arrow, like that, custom name plus arrow, you'll see, we'll correct this in a minute, but you can see because the orientation of the cell is the other way round, it's actually not showing up at the moment, but we'll fix that in a minute. Again here, value field settings, this time we'll make it the down arrow and we'll hit OK. Then if we hover over that so we get an arrow down across all those fields, we'll highlight all the field names there. And then what we can do is we can orientate them normally. And again, it's not on the menu, it's all grayed out, but if you just normalize the text like that, and you notice one of the side effects, and it's a strange one, is it left aligns the cell as well, which we don't actually want. We'll just indent it a bit so that we've got an indent as we had before. And then for this particular one, we want to change the font size. Now, one of the unfortunate issues is, and please comment if you know how to do this, I can't work out how to highlight just the up arrow other than to hold down Control and do them all. I'm going to do all of those, and I'm going to make that into new font. So the font I'm going to just put as the standard sort of caliber font, and I'm going to put it up to about 20, and then maybe I'll indent it a bit as well, so it's sort of more like in the middle. And then I'm going to do something similar for the red one, where so I made it font size 20, I indented it twice, I turned it into caliber. So actually I indented it once, didn't I? This will withstand a refresh, as you can see. And now what I want to just show you is that you can add drill down field on this. So if I do field list, show the field list, and I'm going to add now product subcategory under there. So now I've got this drill down facility. I can drill down on furniture and it keeps all this same formatting. I might look at that and go, yeah, there appears to be some significant problem on office supplies. So I'm going to drill down on office supplies and see where is that. Right, it looks like binders and binder accessories has got some significant negative variances to budget. We can make a copy of that pivot table, for example, here. And we can put anything we like in this. So if I get rid of product category, for example, take months out of the picture and have them as columns, it's showing like that. And then we could have like actual years as well as a row and take that off the slicer. So it's incredibly flexible. All this formatting, bar the arrows by the look of it, has stayed with us, and we can play around with this data to our heart's content. So I hope you found that useful, because I know that if you start producing stuff like this, you're going to blow everyone else out of the water in your company. You're going to really impress people with this kind of stuff. No one's going to know how you've done it. Good luck with it. Like I said, download this spreadsheet. It's all completely ready to go. I mean, in actual fact, you could pretty much pop your own data in there and start playing around with the measures. And you could get it up and running in pretty much no time at all. Loads more stuff like this on this channel. Make sure you stay tuned for more game-changing techniques in the future.